Everyone. We do have quite a bit of information to get through today, so I'm just going to jump right into it in the content as well as introduce myself. Why are we here? We're here to learn about problem discovery. It's just as it sounds. It's about finding problems in people's lives, uncovering the importance of these problems, understanding what the problems actually entail, and learning how people currently solve these problems. So before I jump in further, I just want to give a huge thank you to SDG for having me today, as well as all of their sponsors, including the NEM. I see that we do have a chat coming through. So as I'm sharing my screen, I won't actually be able to see the chat, but I am going to hold a period of 10 minutes just at the end of this session to answer any questions that you may have. And I'm also available to answer questions throughout the weekend, of course. So I couldn't be more excited to talk to you today and share a little bit about our story at Greenhouse. But yes, let's learn about that chat function. So although I can't see it, I'll take a look in a couple seconds. And I would like to know what city or town that you are zooming in from. Are you in Kitchener? Are you in Cambridge, Waterloo? Maybe you're joining us from the West Coast and you're in really early bird. I would love to hear what city or town that you're calling in from. And then also feel free to share which academic program that you're in. So right now, I'm actually calling in from Waterloo. My undergraduate degree was in food science from Ryerson University. I also did my certificate in food security, which you'll learn more about. And I did my Master of Management at Queen's University. And then I landed here at the University of Waterloo. So if you're in my problem space workshop, which is how might we find solutions to improve cultural sensitivity in national and local food security programs, I will be asking you the following question to share orally in the chat, depending on how many of you signed up for that specific problem statement. So you'll learn that a lot of entrepreneurs choose problems to solve because it's something that has personally impacted them. And that's what fuels the passion that they have behind the actual problem that they're hoping to solve. This is a Google Drive link that I created. I did have to switch to my personal computer because I had some privacy issues on my work laptop, but I will drop this chat in. I'll see if I can open up my other laptop because what's in this Google Drive is all of these slides, but then additionally, I've included some various toolkits and deeper information about some of the frameworks that I'm going to be chatting about today, as well as more resources specifically for my problem statement. When you get into that actual Google Drive, it's separated by problem definition information in a folder, but then also sustainable development goals content. So think of these as a resource to you. By no means do I expect you to, if you're in my problem statement, to finish reading or reviewing everything that's there. You will have access to it after the weekend is finished. So hopefully it'll be of use to you. So let's dive in. I know that I'm starting a couple minutes late here. So what can you expect to learn with me over the next 50 or so minutes? So we're going to be going over the background of why it's actually important to start with problem definition, because whether you're wanting to start a new venture, you want to look more into a policy, or you're developing a grassroots initiative, it always starts with problem definition. What do you actually want to solve? And then to close things off, we're going to go over some of the specific tools or processes that I recommend that you follow on your own time to help you complete the milestones and next steps to stay involved in our community here and get some support. I see that we have 8 comments, so maybe we can see if we're all in the city, same cities. Calling in from Waterloo. So many Waterloos. Also, Jahanvi's in Waterloo, 3rd year of environment and business. ERS, Waterloo. NBUS, Waterloo, 2nd year of environment, resources and sustainability. 1st year of accounting and finance. Oh, hi, Justin. 3B term of environment and business. Manisha, hi. Richmond Hill, 2nd year of computer science, ERS. So one thing that you will learn, and I can talk about this for another 4 hours, is networking as well as building your community when you want to solve a problem is quite important. So I do recommend that it's great that you shared where you're calling in from and also what program that you're in. If you have LinkedIn, I just recommend that you share it in the chat now as well. So let's go through. Quickly, I'm just going to do a very, very high level overview of Greenhouse, so where I'm coming from, and then how we can actually help you throughout your journey even after this weekend in collaboration with SDGs. So we're a social impact incubator here in Waterloo. I see a lot of you are here. And if you haven't heard of us before, we're located at St. Paul's University College, and we offer various programs and a community for students to develop their problem-solving skills by way of either being placed in an organization that already exists and helping them build something out, or actually creating their own thing from essentially nothing because they're passionate about a problem. You're here on a Saturday morning, right? So I know that you're already very passionate about making social impact and social change in your communities. And essentially what we want to do, and the benefit of attending events like this for SDGs as a change maker, is you get to learn about your problem potentially differently, but then also the encouragement of solving that problem is fueled in communities like this. So good for you. Thank you so much for coming out here this Saturday morning. And then again, quickly, I haven't even told you my name yet or introduced myself. So my name is Kate or Katie Hegteveit. I have no preference on Kate or Katie. And I am currently the Workplace Innovation Manager at Greenhouse. So that social impact incubator I just spoke about. So I do hope to support your journey long after this weekend, if you are hoping to bring some of these ideas that you're talking about to life. And I am going to quickly just share a little bit about myself and why I became so passionate about helping students solve problems that they're passionate about. Growing up, until I was 21 years old, actually, I was set on practicing family medicine. So maybe you have some friends or even yourself that are set on practicing medicine, but I had very narrow tunnel vision. So it was almost like it was medicine or nothing for me. It was the only passion or the only thing that I thought I would thrive in. And I was very passionate about this because I had health issues as a child. So I wanted to help other youth like me. And I figured, I wouldn't be able to make an impact until at least my 30s. And maybe I would give back in some way by branching into pediatric critical care or starting a nonprofit health unit for children, for example. But it wasn't until I came across a call to action. So I was at Ryerson University, and there was a homeless shelter, so a youth homeless shelter that said, we have lost funding for fitness and health programs. And we're looking for someone to either donate or help out. And I just remember reading that problem that the shelter said that they were experiencing. And, I was just a kid. I was like 20 years old. And I thought to myself, I think I can solve that problem. So without doing too much research myself, and I don't encourage this, an important part of problem definition is actually doing a lot of research around it about what exists to currently solve it. I booked a train to Camp Fit Pro Montreal, and I became a group fitness instructor. And I pitched myself to the shelter. I said, would you let me teach a class to the kids that are living in your shelter? They said yes. And long story short, 3 years later, we've now touched the lives of youth in every single province and territory by mobilizing fitness instructors and yoga instructors to go into homeless shelters all across Canada. And the reason why I heard about this position was because my nonprofit social enterprise actually partnered with kinesiology and health sciences here at the University of Waterloo in connecting practicum students to help me try to solve the problem that I was wanting to solve, which was ill health and unemployment and at-risk and homeless young people. So again, I can talk about this all day, but we have a lot of content to actually get through. But if you have any questions about starting your own nonprofit, or specifically if you're wondering if a social enterprise, so a for-profit social model would be a fit for you, I did both. I would love to talk to you. And of course, yes, I'll hold some time for questions at the end for any of the content I'm going through today. Okay, so just to reiterate here, sorry, I'm going through my notes. My problem statement for later is, how might we find solutions to improve cultural sensitivity and national and local food security programs? So food security is different than food safety. So I know sometimes that can be confused there. Food security is essentially the equitable access to safe and nutritious, healthy food. The reason why I brought this problem statement to Jahanvi here at the SDG Alliance is because I actually tried to solve this problem when I was in my undergrad. I was doing my food security certificate and I failed. So because I didn't use the toolkits and frameworks that I'm going to show you today, my program completely flopped. So what I tried to do was I tried to do something similar to what I did with Boot Camps for Change, but I essentially recruited dietitians to go into food banks in the Greater Toronto area. And all I was really asking them to do or doing with that program was just having the dietitians provide health and nutritional information to the people while they were coming in to get their food. But I quickly realized that the reason why it was failing is because I was not aware of the depth and the experiences of the people that were coming to the food banks. So as an example, Yonge Street Mission in Toronto, Ontario, they did a challenge saying, you have to live on $7.35, or I believe it might have been $7.25 a day. So $7.25 a day, because that is the average disposable income of someone that's coming into a food bank, specifically that food bank. So how effective could my intervention possibly be when I am bringing dietitians in that are recommending, $6 blueberries to individuals that are coming in to access the food bank? So, I was like, well, at first I thought to myself, well, I don't understand why they would go for the protein. Of course, they would go for a $6 sub or something like that, because there's protein there versus going for the blueberries and then that's all that they eat all day. So this is part of a human-centered framework that I'm going to dive into a little bit more with problem definition. But one of the key parts of problem definition, or a very important part in finding the best solution to that problem, is taking account of all of the experiences of the people and looking at different stakeholders that are impacted by the problem you hope to solve. So it wasn't until I actually took the time to speak with the people that were coming in and out of the food bank that we were able to actually come to a great solution together. Another framework that you might see for something like this, or another way that you may hear this described as building, a for youth by youth model, means you're bringing the end user, so the person that is benefiting from your intervention, to actually come forward and help solve that challenge with you. So it's very important when you're undertaking the definition of a problem or you're coming up with a solution to really speak and consider the experiences and the external factors that may be influencing the people that are impacted by this problem. And there may be multiple stakeholders impacted by the problem. There may be multiple ways you can solve the problem. But again, I'll go through a little bit more of this in detail. And I encourage you to check out the frameworks on the Google Drive when I'm able to open up my work laptop in a minute. So like I had mentioned, we're going to go through a couple frameworks today. You may see or you may find different problem solving or problem definition frameworks online. So at the end of the day, when you're defining a problem, you want to look for a problem that would create the most positive impact on the people affected by them. So what I mean by that is what the potential impact of solutions that would come from that problem domain. So usually the more opportunity for impact, or the greater the impact the solutions would have, the more opportunity for what we call value creation would be within that problem domain. So I know that some of these concepts can be a little abstract, especially for those that may not have a business background. So again, more than happy to answer any questions at the end of this, and you will have access to the slides following this. So no worries, you don't have to quickly take notes or worry about taking screenshots. And I hope that this content will help you as you begin your journey this weekend. So if you can understand problems through all these lenses you see here, through problem definition, you are more likely to develop a solution that actually works. Because like I had mentioned, when I tried doing that food bank intervention in my undergrad, it failed because I did not understand any of these things that were here. So I do want to share, I have like a story of a greenhouse team, and it gives you a sense of why this particular milestone, so the first one, problem definition, is quite important. So there was a team, and this is before I joined Greenhouse, of fourth year systems design engineers here at the University of Waterloo. And what they wanted to do is they wanted to build a product that addressed a real need, but they didn't know specifically what that need was or where to start. So they took place in the Workplace Innovation Program here, and they were paired with a child treatment center called Kids Ability. I know that a lot of you are local, so you've probably heard of it. And they were given the general problem domain of strategic relevance to that organization. So the problem area that they actually started with was the inability of some of the clients, so the youth, to engage in spontaneous play. So just giving a youth maybe a toy and then expecting them to be able to interact with that toy in a group of people, for example. So from there, what they actually did is they interviewed staff, so staff that are working with the actual youth that have physical or cognitive disabilities. And then they shadowed client appointments, and they also talked to the families of those. And this allowed them to address specific client needs by finding root causes. So they actually identified, in my notes here, I see that they identified over 100 different root causes or needs that stemmed from this larger problem domain that they defined of the inability to actually engage in spontaneous play. So then once they had done that, once they were able to define that problem, they then analyze the needs that they have. And what is often recommended in these frameworks is actually looking for themes or clusters within those needs. So they actually process the needs critically to see which ones showed the most promise or an opportunity for innovation. And innovation can be seen as, finding new ways to solve old problems. So after this problem analysis, what they did, I'm looking through the workflow that they have here, they identified the set of needs related to technology the clients were using for themselves. So I'm speaking quickly today. So as an example, I would speak 120 words per minute, but a lot of clients that they were maybe trying to create a product to solve for would speak at 10 words per minute. So this technology drastically reduced the client's abilities to form social relationships or have conversations with other kids. So the team here recognized that there was an opportunity to use more hardware or software to actually speed up the process from old and dated technology. And that's where Recommend was founded. So using a combination of environmental context, personal information, they actually increased the rate of communication anywhere from double, meaning that some youth with physical or cognitive disabilities that were speaking 10 words per minute now had the ability to speak 20 words per minute. I do like to provide this example as a way to show how starting all the way back in the product development process, beginning with that problem definition and validation milestone and moving through concept creation and product development is what made Recommend very, very successful. So what you're participating in this weekend, it's an interactive process to quickly solve big challenges. So to create new products, services, processes, or improve existing ones. So there's a whole slew of methodologies and tools that were very effective for me that I've shared in the drive. Because when I was first introduced to this, like this general problem definition framework, I was struggling to wrap my arms around it, meaning I was looking at this and I said, okay, great, but then how am I actually going to put this into practice? And that's where I find the frameworks or toolkits that you can use, that you can take away the learnings and put them into practice are quite important. So now I'm going to talk about why you might want to start to define a problem before you actually start working on it. So one of the most important reasons is that it reduces risk down the line. So we see a lot of teams and individuals who develop products that don't necessarily address a real need. So the consequences of that approach is what happens when you start with an idea and later determine whether or not it solves a real problem. Oh, sorry. Just going to admit, Neha. You can spend a lot of time, energy, and money into building something that no one actually needs. So for example, we wouldn't spend a lot of time creating a chair if nobody wanted to sit, and designing a chair if nobody wanted to sit. Entrepreneurs, so whether you are a seasoned entrepreneur just starting out, they're often resource strapped. And by resources, I also include time. And they need to manage how and where they actually allocate their resources. So one of the greatest resources available to an entrepreneur early in one's career is time, like I had mentioned. So we need to make sure that that time is used as effectively as possible. And to put this another way, we need to reduce the risk of wasting one of our most important resources, which is our time. So problem definition actually helps us reduce that risk because you're identifying customer needs first. You're asking them, what problem do you have? And then thinking about how you can take that information and creating a solution that works for them. So this approach is sometimes called the market pull or needs-based innovation problem definition, where you actually use the needs of the market to pull forward products that most directly and effectively meet those needs. So a lot of you are here because you know what problem you're interested in. You may know what specifically problem space that you're interested in, or maybe you've been thinking about putting something together for a while. You've done this before, or it's your first time. The next set of slides are just a reference for you in ideating around the problem that you're interested in. So one thing that I do want to mention, and I'll bring it back to my story at the food bank, is you have to be mindful of the complexity of the problem or problems that you're looking at. So problems do exist on a spectrum of complexity, with simple problems being at one end and highly complex problems at the other. And what I love about this framework, which is called the Impacts Gaps Canvas, is it takes a look, and you can also think of this as system design, or you may have heard of the concept system design thinking before. And it actually guides us, and this is great for problems that fall in the middle of that complexity spectrum. So you don't want problems when you're defining your problem that are too simple, but you also don't want problems that are too nuanced, complex, and difficult to understand. So the other thing to consider, like I've mentioned, is to look for problems that would create the most positive impact on the people affected by them. So essentially, what's the potential impact of solutions that would come from that problem domain? So usually the more opportunity for impact, or the greater the impact that I've mentioned previously, the more opportunity that there is to create something of real value for someone. So I do recommend this tool. I have it in I didn't put it in the Google Drive, but I do have the link on my work computer, so I can share it in the chat. And this is a great tool if you want to understand the landscape of a problem prior or during problem definition, and possibly identify some paths as to how you might contribute to a solution. So it's now used in a competition. You may have heard of it. I think it's called Global Challenge here at the University of Waterloo, or Challenge. It's also a great toolkit for the Halt Prize. And when you're forming this, or when you're doing your problem definition, the questions or the inquiries on the left will actually help you map out the problem, including who or what is impacted and what is holding the current status quo in place. So why is it that nothing is changing? And then who stands to actually be potentially negatively impacted if the problem is solved? That's an interesting one. And then the history of the problem as well. So you can use the questions on the right side as well to help you map out the solutions landscape. So once you solve, or once you deeply understand the problem domain, the right side is more for coming up with potential solutions to those. And in the middle is the actual impact gap. So you explore this gap from that, 30,000 foot level. What is missing in the whole ecosystems of the solution landscape? What can be connected up these efforts? What regulation may be needed, et cetera. So for problem definition, I really encourage you to take a look at the left side of the Impacts Gaps Canvas. So really is a great framework, and it's used in a lot of competitions, like I mentioned, but also accelerators, presentations, and it's slowly becoming more popular. But now I'm going to touch on design thinking to come up with your problem definitions. So design thinking is a human-centered process. Okay, but what does that actually mean? So with the food bank, for example, when I actually took the time to speak to the people that are impacted by the problem, to get a human face to that problem definition and really understand their experiences, I was able to come up with a much better solution. So it relies on that interview sort of process where you're positioning questions, open-ended questions, to someone who is impacted by that problem and then gathering insight. But it's also a lot of the frameworks are based on just observing individuals that are impacted by the problem, and then actually trying to gain inspiration and help identify the challenge or the problems that they need solving. So this design thinking approach here, it's been really popular at the Stanford D School. And one of the things that's nice about that resource is a lot of the materials are publicly available, many of which at like no cost or very, very inexpensive. So it's quite likely that if you start talking about problem definition and problem solving, you will likely come across a diagram similar to this. In the problem definition stage, I know it almost looks like a timeline. So it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like that. But this process throughout the actual problem solving space, but also problem definition, is not linear. So what I mean by that is you start at the beginning stage, but then you actually might get to the prototype stage and then find yourself needing to crawl back and say, oh, we observed something in a user or a customer that we didn't think about in the beginning, or we didn't pose that question in the beginning. So within problem definition, I know that a lot of you are very passionate about certain topics and certain issues, but don't be afraid to go back and adjust the problem a little bit, or go back and adjust the solution a little bit to better solve the need of that problem. So I know it does seem linear, but it's an iterative process is what we call it, because you're often going back and forth. So there are 5 steps, like I mentioned. So the first step is to empathize. And this is what I should have done in the problem definition space with my food bank problem. So then we form that into a statement. So the how might we statement, and that's what you've seen during this hackathon weekend, is the how might we statements when you're trying to find the best way to solve a very unique problem. I'm gonna have a little sip of my iced coffee. I'm trying the new, I like the brown sugar Starbucks one. This is vanilla. They solve the problem that not a lot of people like brown sugar, or not everyone likes brown sugar, but I like the brown sugar one better. Anyways, but I think it's important that when you are coming together in a space like this, so whether it's in person or virtually, or you're coming together as a team to try to define a problem or solve a problem, you do have to remember that everyone is coming at things differently. So we all process information, we absorb information differently, and we all have different personalities. So there's a whole other swath of variables that actually play into how we think about things, including our experiences, and how we interpret information and how we communicate that information. So there is a rapid decision-making guide that's in the Google Drive that I'll share with you. So essentially what that toolkit is used for, what's beneficial with that toolkit, is it allows us to come to a conclusion together, understanding that everyone in your group, or when you're even speaking to people that are impacted by this problem that you're hoping to define, we're all coming at it from a slightly different perspective on things. And that's awesome, especially in the case of innovation. So do ensure to keep that in mind. Definitely recommend that you check out that framework as you're beginning to define your problem, or when you're also thinking about coming up with ways to effectively solve that problem that you're passionate about. So I have another practical example here. So in the traditional product development or process development or service development, you may have an idea. So maybe let's just say it's a new product and you think it's awesome. So as an example, the service I thought, which was dietitians are so expensive. Dietitians are sometimes, up to $90 or even more per hour. And they may be located in a spot that's not convenient. There may be transportation barriers to someone accessing them in addition to financial barriers. So I thought to myself, well, why didn't I just bring the dietitian to the food bank? But I didn't consider that the dietitian would need to empathize with the person that's at the food bank as well. So again, coming back to this, you have an idea, which I thought my idea was awesome. It didn't work, it failed, where you're doing something that you're maybe not directly impacted by the problem. So you think that the user is going to love it, but it's brand new. So dietitians coming to food banks was something that I had never heard of before. And I just thought to myself, well, why hasn't anyone thought of this? It didn't look like anything that I had ever seen. So I wanted to launch it and I wanted it to be successful, but there was a lot of unknowns. And I didn't take the time to actually define and speak to the people that were impacted by the problem. So in an old way of doing things, we don't get the data. So we don't know if our customer is actually going to buy it and adopt it until we launch it. So now, if there's an established brand or company, you may notice that they send you forms, for instance, or they ask you, how could we expand this product line? What would you be interested in purchasing? So they're asking you these questions because they want to get to know you, but specifically, they actually want to get to know the problems that you're experiencing so that when they put out a product, it effectively suits your needs. So in the old way, though, you used to just put something out and then hopefully somebody will buy it and somebody will find it. So when moving into a traditional development cycle, you have your idea and you come to that idea in any number of ways. So you fall in love with your idea, you send it to whoever is building it. And then if it's a technology thing, for example, you send it to your development team. But then what ends up actually happening is when you're done your building, you set up your launch campaign and your sales process, for example, and then eventually you get the data on that. But the problem is it may work and it may not. So my solution that I tried to launch in the food banks, it did not work. So the other problem with this build cycle is that it tends to expand. So whether it's a new product or project that you're hoping to launch or understand in the definition cycle, what you anticipate in terms of the time that it will take to launch that product or service is oftentimes longer than what you thought in the beginning. So we may have to make sure it's perfect before it gets out there. Oftentimes we may have a perfection mindset. Oh, I'm investing this much time, this much money into something like this. I want it to be perfect before I launch it. So your product cycle actually extends to 18 months, to 24 months, to 36 months. But as the time extends, you increase the likelihood that you're actually building the wrong thing. So any number of things can change, including the experience of the problem of the people that you're designing this for. So it's a good thing, to talk to your customers in the first place. And in 5 years after you've launched, the problem isn't relevant anymore. So that's why, I can't encourage, because nothing is black and white, to just launch, because oftentimes, you may hear the phrase fail fast, or just get your MVP out there, which is a minimum viable product. So the first thing that you have that could work, just put it out there. No situation is black or white, especially in social impact. But I would say I lean more to this, which is pilot something first, not without defining and understanding your problem. But I think piloting something while still taking the time to define the problem by way of talking to the potential people that would be impacted by that problem is much more effective than building something perfect over years and then launching it without taking the time to actually get to know the person that is impacted by the problem that you're hoping to solve. So again, in terms of what I recommend or what is concrete in terms of timelines, it's not black and white. It all depends on the social impact project that you're building and what you want to create. There's so many factors, budget comes to mind. So what I do recommend is get a pilot out there and bring the people that are impacted by the problem to the table in designing the solution that you hope to use. So if you're creating a solution for Indigenous communities, bring Indigenous communities to the table to help design that. And then do a pilot, which means, like a mini version or a test run, a trial run, and then really get a lot of feedback from that test run and use that to create maybe something a little bit more permanent or larger or more impactful, use that information to scale, et cetera. So essentially what I'm hoping to share here or emphasize here is that it's very, very important to always keep in mind the person that you're helping in the problem, and problems can change over time. So I don't know if I fully agree always with fail fast. Nothing is black and white, but take the time to define the problem by way of conversations with the people impacted. Idea and data. So that's basically the minimization. So through these rapid design sprints or scenarios like this, where you're coming up with a solution very quickly, it allows you to get that data quickly, and then you're just coming up with multiple ideas. Then you take the time afterwards to decide, well, what seems like the space or the problem that I can make the most impact for myself and other people. Some more tips or some more things that I want to emphasize as to why problem definition is actually important is that it provides strategic clarity. So it reduces the uncertainty for some of the decisions that you'll be making in later stages. So you can think of problem definition as a proxy for goal setting. So whether you're doing this by yourself or in a team, it actually allows you to ask yourself, what purpose does this product I want to create serve? So that's very important. And that's why problem definition is crucial for any sort of product or service that you're hoping to create in social impact or otherwise. And then it also helps you and your team to decide, well, what does success look like for this product? So I know that problems, with the SDGs as well, it just shows how intertwined they may be. You may uncover or find out new things like, oh, I didn't know, for instance, poverty was related to, I'm making this up, poverty was related to education, or for example. So you could look at two different sections and uncover through your problem definition process that two things are a lot more intertwined than you thought. So by defining which problem you want to solve, it theoretically creates a benchmark or a milestone that, okay, if I solve this problem, my solution is successful. But I do recommend that you stay away from that, because so many problems, especially in the realm of social impact, are so intertwined. So I recommend that you start, and you've probably heard of this before. I saw a lot of environment students, the SMART goals. So it's measurable, it's attainable, it's realistic, and it's time bound. So with that, the purpose of problem definition is actually to find out or explore, well, how do I know if my service is successful or my program successful? Well, I solve this problem. And if it's too broad, because again, like if I said to myself, or I put a problem statement out for this challenge saying, solve food insecurity. I mean, I can't solve, nothing great is ever achieved alone, but I couldn't solve that. And it would be hard for me to measure, how much I actually solved that. So use the experiences, put the face to it for the solution that you're thinking about, to actually come up with ways or milestones that you can track your success over time. And this also is important for like vision. So short-term and long-term. I mean, I shouldn't say that none of us in the room will ever not solve food insecurity. It's definitely a lofty goal. But sky's the limit here. But with that, it's good to define the problem maybe a little bit more tightly if it's going to be like a short-term goal, but then you can understand how that tightly defined problem fits into that larger scale. So as you'll find throughout the process on the weekend, and then also the more that you look into the SDGs, you'll see that they're very much intertwined, but even the smallest impact that you have on a community, for example, can create a domino effect. So sky's the limit here. And so for strategic planning without a well-defined problem or a well-established goal, you're kind of just wandering through the woods at that point, hoping that you'll be somewhere that you want to be at the end. You can do that. You can start with a very wide problem and figure it out, but I do find that it's not recommended for problem definition in the space for rapid problem solving. And the process of goal and strategy setting will actually give you more confidence and clarity in your decision making. So the clarity is really hard to come by in the early stages of development, when there's a lot of uncertainty and a lot of potential avenues that you could go down. So the more confidence and clarity that you actually have in your decisions, the more quickly you'll be able to move through the development milestones that come throughout this weekend, but then after this weekend as well. So a little bit more as to why defining the actual problem is important is it does get you into the mindset of opportunity recognitions. So good ideas are sometimes hard to find, but problems are everywhere. So every one of these problems can be an opportunity to alleviate pain, or what we call a buzzword that we use is pain point that someone is experiencing, and actually create value for those that are experiencing it. So by understanding what the actual opportunities are, you can identify which ones you're well placed to take on. So earlier today, I shared a little bit about why I was passionate about something. If it's creating that fire in your belly and, it's really wanting you to step out of your comfort zone and create something, it's probably worth taking a look at. It might be a really good problem to solve. So the final reason why problem definition is important is because the process from taking problems in the field and picking options that often requires a lot of research, inquiry, and investigation. And it has been well established in innovation management literature that the more knowledge that's actually available to innovation managers such as yourselves, the more likely that they are to succeed. So by understanding or knowing what the knowledge landscape is actually like, the better equipped you are to navigate the pitfalls, because, this process will not be a straight line. You'll try things. And like I mentioned earlier with the design thinking for problem definition too, is you may have to take a look back at the drawing board, and that's okay. Or you may think something would work, like my food bank thing, and say, you know what, I think I have to let this go, or I think I really have to go back to the drawing board and scratch this whole solution that I thought. I was solving the wrong problem at that time, which was access to dietetics for those that are accessing a food bank, or access to dietitians for those accessing a food bank. It's not a relevant problem. There were other problems that were more pressing for them. So I had to completely let go of that problem statement and find a way to define that problem in a different way. And by doing that, or the first step I did in succeeding in that, is not only speaking with the people impacted by the problem, but coming up with a wide range of problem definition statements, and then thinking to myself, based on my experience, but then also the experience of the individuals I've spoken to, what problem could I realistically and feasibly solve that will have the biggest impact on the people I hope to help? So problem definition definitely is not a straight linear line. And oftentimes you may have to go to the drawing board, or you may find that someone is better suited to solve the problem and you can join them, or you can find another space. So that's totally fine as well. A lot of students are passionate about lots of different problems, and sometimes it's best to go with one that is burning the fire in your belly first, and then doing the smaller fire later, and then figuring out you can actually solve that problem. But anyways, I will keep working through that, and more than happy to answer any questions. I'm almost done here. A little behind on time, but we're close. So there are a lot of reasons why you might want to define the problem before you start working on it, like I've mentioned. But I've gone through some processes with human-centered design, with a problem-based framework, but then also when it comes to deciding the problem that you want to solve, oftentimes you want to come up with many ideas. And this is an example of how problem definition can help you throughout the process. It's called actually problem-based learning, or PBL. And it is a student-centered approach. So this is where students learn about a subject, such as what you're doing over the weekend, when you work in groups to solve an open-ended problem. So the problem is what drives the motivation. So if you look at a list of problems and think to yourself, which one do I want to solve? Most likely the first thing that you're thinking about is not, can I solve it? It's, do I want to solve it, right? So this is a great toolkit for you to use. So I highly recommend that you take a look in the drive to learn a little bit more about that. And then this is the PBL framework explained a little deeper. So there's an example here. Canada has the highest rate of MS in the world. This isn't an assumption where someone believes it to be true, it's a fact. So another thing is that I recommend you do as you're defining your problem is to let go of any assumptions that you may have had prior to that about the solution that you think may be appropriate for that problem. So again, the practical example, I thought the problem for why low-income individuals that were accessing the food bank didn't choose healthy food is simply because they didn't have the knowledge. That's incorrect. They didn't have the resources. So then how we pivoted that solution was, okay, I debunked my assumption that I had going in, which was completely false. And by way of talking to both the food bank workers and the people accessing that food bank, I was able to drop all my assumptions about that problem definition and come to a more realistic, better solution for those individuals. And they felt more empowered to solve that problem as they best saw fit as well. So the other problem with my service that I was providing is the dietitians didn't know anything about the people that were coming in. So the dietitians at that food bank did not know if the people who accessed it, what was their first language? Do they have a family? What is their budget? Like, these are questions that would be very relevant in deciding how one goes about selecting food for them or accessing food in a food bank. But I just didn't know. I was ignorant to that, and I didn't take the time to look into frameworks like this and talk to the people that I hope to solve a problem for. So when you are defining your problem, I do encourage you to drop your assumptions. Of course, if you have lived experiences, bring those lived experiences to the table. So for instance, if you had access to food bank before, or you have a family or close loved one that has access to food bank before, bring that story. That's not an assumption, right? I assumed, oh, well, they just need to see a dietitian. They need to learn more about healthy eating. Incorrect. That was an incorrect assumption that I had that caused me to solve the wrong problem that was adding no value, or I don't want to say no value, but was not appropriately giving them the tools and the resources to make an informed decision about their own health. So again, this framework is great. It's on the Google Drive. I am a little bit behind, so I'm going to quickly go through these slides. If you would like to learn more about problem spaces, problem definition, there is an incubator on campus called Problem Lab, which is really great. Or it's not an incubator. I think they're either an accelerator or a community of individuals that teach students how to solve problems in meaningful ways. But then also Greenhouse that I'm with is fantastic too. The Social Innovators and Training Program is for you, or it's a good program for you if you want to start something from nothing, meaning if you want to start something from scratch, you want to be an entrepreneur, I'd recommend you apply to that program. If you would rather build your confidence using a network or an infrastructure already available, so for example, you would rather, and I'm using the food bank example, you would rather work with a food bank and come up with a solution within that food bank for food security, for example, the Workplace Innovation Program is a good program for you. But I recommend that you take a look. And then this is what we do. So this is like the defining or mapping out the problems. So some of the content that I went through with you today is like the second stage. So the first is that entrepreneurial journey or entrepreneurial mindset kind of thing that we talked about, which includes a dropping of the assumptions. And then mapping out or defining the problem is what we do for SIT in the second week. And then that's it. So if you have any questions, I am a little short on my Q&A time, but I really do recommend that you take a look at that drive. So I have the link in the slides, but I can open up my work laptop. And if you have any questions at all, please feel free to come off mute. And also, if you're not in my problem space, which is the how can we increase like the cultural appropriateness of food or services in food banks, feel free to add me on LinkedIn and reach out anytime. But thank you, everyone, and I'll hang out here till 11.
Thank you so much, Kate. We can open up the floor for the rest of the couple of minutes we have for questions. So we're just going to hang out for a little bit. I think our OSPI partners, thank you so much for this event. We can stop recording. I think it's okay if we wanted to stop recording.